Hi, everyone, and welcome to this Modern Web online event. Happy to have just actually 4 amazing women on the call today, starting this great meetup. I'm going to go ahead and present my slides really quickly, and then we'll go ahead and do introductions. Give me 1 second. Let me go ahead and press, let's see, where is it? Share your screen. Okay, there we go. Application window. Done. Okay, you guys should be able to see that. Let me see if I can go ahead and present. Can you all see my screen? My slides? Yes, no?
Yes.
Anybody? Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So Modern Web. We do this, but by the way, we do this in Raleigh, we do this in the Bay Area, and we do this online. Always looking for speakers. So if you like speaking about these different technologies, you can look for the Modern Web CFP or ping me on Twitter at Lady Elite if you can't find the link, and I can give it to you. This event is sponsored by This.Labs, which is a JavaScript consultancy focused on helping sort of change the ratio in tech. So we have a really amazing apprentice program. So if companies are looking to hire women, this is a really great way to, I like to say, put your money where your mouth is. But it's a really awesome way to hire women, and the work that we do, even if you're not hiring a female, goes back to the initiatives that we have contributing to women in tech. And, we obviously have a really amazing team as well. So our team is mainly made up of core contributors of different frameworks and libraries. So whether it's Angular, React, React Native, Polymer, Node, et cetera, like we do all the things. So speakers, so Carlos unfortunately is sick today, so he will not be able to join us, but self-care is very important. So we will miss him, but we'll have him on at another time. But then we also have Tatiana speaking today, and she's going to be talking about edge cases out of the margin and into the view. I love that. And then Jen Luker as well, who's going to be talking about accessibility myths. Another announcement, we do Modern Web Online every other month. So the next one is going to be July 10th. So definitely check that out. And our website is this.co if you want to see all the other interesting events that we have going on. So Tatiana's going to go first, then Jen, and there is a live chat. So if you all have any questions or anything like that, feel free to paste it in that chat and we will get to them. And those are my slides. I'm done with my slides. But let me go ahead and again, just really quickly introduce some folks. So my name is Tracy. You can follow me on Twitter at Lady Elite. I'm a Google developer expert, ArcGIS core team, all the things. And then we also have Eva joining us. You can follow Eva on Twitter at EvaHow. And she is with the STOT as well, focused on doing things related to our apprentice program. So thanks for joining us, Eva. And then Jen Luker. Jen, you can find her on Twitter at KnitCodeMonkey. And is your GitHub Knitting Code Monkey or Knit Code Monkey? I know your Instagram is Knitting Code Monkey.
I've been very silly converting all the things over to Knit Code Monkey because apparently Knitting Code Monkey is 1 character too long for most things. So
very annoying. But you can follow her there, and she might be nice enough to teach you knitting. So I learned how to knit from Jen at ngconf, and this is it's called a drop stitch. So it's long enough to where I'm quitting. I'm just gonna make it
it's the perfect cowl size.
Yes, exactly. And then Tatiana, you can follow Tatiana on Twitter at Tatiana Mac. Is that correct, Tatiana? Yes, and she is super awesome. If you meet her, she might give you a sticker of her face, which is very awesome. So we have to thank Perf Matters and the wonderful Estelle for doing that. So that being said, I'm going to go ahead and have Tatiana go ahead and start. And yeah, Tatiana, we're very glad to hear you.
Perfect. All right, so I'm going to screen share.
Yep, we can see your screen.
Okay, it's just lagging a little bit on my end.
Yeah, we can see your slides.
All right, can you see everything okay?
Oh, you just stopped screen sharing.
Oh.
Magic.
See everything okay?
Oh, you just stopped screen sharing. Oops.
Oh. Is that working now?
Yeah, I can see your screen, yes.
Okay, cool.
But you're not sharing your slides yet.
How about now?
Now you are sharing your slides, yes.
Perfect. All right. So I'm just going to walk us through kind of an ordinary form. So we fill out a form. Maybe we start with our first name, right? So I'm Tatiana. We go to our last name, Mac. Then we get to gender. Okay, well, I don't really believe in the gender binary, but my options here are male, female, and birthday. And I guess I'm going to think about what this is going to be used for. Maybe if I prefer not to say, that's another woman who's being excluded. So I guess I'll instead opt for female. Race. Okay, this one's pretty easy for me. In this list, Asian Pacific Islander. Great. It's a meh form field. Well, what if we look at this for somebody else? So let's look at this for someone named Kim Young Mi. Kim Young Mi might look at this and say, all right, I know when they say first name, what they really mean is given name, and Young Mi is my given name. So I'm going to put that first. And then for last name, we know that what they really mean here is family name. So maybe we'll type in Kim. And so the impact this has is that the printed name is going to appear as Young Mi. So Young Mi's actual name is Kim Young Mi. That can feel kind of defeating. Let's move on to the next step. Well, Kim Young Mi is non-binary and actually does prefer to say, but that's not an option here. So what happens to the data that we receive? Well, so maybe we see that there's 78% male, maybe 30% female, and then we have this 2%, which we can't really parse into anything meaningful because what we've done is we've unintentionally included not only the disclosed non-binary folks like Young Mi, but also undisclosed male, female, and non-binary folks. So basically we've crossed two axes that are inextricable from one another. So it gives us meaningless data. And we can't forget about how Young Mi feels, which is erased. And then what if Young Mi is Black and Korean? Well, okay, so maybe African, that might resonate, but definitely not American, so then other. So Young Mi at this point might be feeling confused. And so in totality, with this form, feeling defeated, erased, or confused, or as I like to combine them, derifused. And you, as a creator of these forms, might be feeling annoyed. You might be thinking something like, yeah, well, she, Tatiana, planned it that way. You're right, he did. This is my talk. That's what I do. And you might say, this is too confusing. Like, why can't we make it simpler? Or I've never met a Black Korean trans person before. And you're probably right. You probably never have. And that lastly, those are statistical anomalies. They're uncommon. We might even call them edge cases. Hello, my name is Tatiana Mac. You can find me at Tatiana T. Mac, and I'm here to talk about edge cases. So I think it's always helpful to slides if you want to follow along, TatianaMac.com/edge cases, or you can feel free to slide into my DMs at Tatiana T. Mac on Twitter. And thank you to all my Patreon sponsors there who make it possible for me to create these talks, especially Webflow. So when we want to talk about edge cases, I think it's always helpful to start with a definition, and how it's defined by Wikipedia is that it's a problem or situation that occurs only at an extreme, maximum or minimum operating parameter. I want to focus here on this part, problem or situation. A problem or situation, if we start with a problem, problems cause issues. They're things that merit solving. And situations are temporary. They're defined by their surroundings. And so what we're saying to Young Mi is that you cause issues. You are a problem to be solved. Your identity is temporary and defined by your surroundings. How derifusing. And the second part of the definition, it occurs only at an extreme, a maximum or minimum operating parameter. All right, well, what causes extremes? Extremes require parameters. So on a circle, it's the circumference. On a line, the endpoints. And when we have groups of users, when we're seeking to create segments or user groups for testing, that's what we do. We make groups. But there's always a user outside of the group, the edge case. And when we start to create specs for our briefs, we might look at things like skin tone or contrast or devices. But again, we've created a parameter. And the fluidity of this all, like right now, it's 2 o'clock in Portland, where I'm from. It's 5 o'clock in New York, and it's almost midnight here in Berlin, where I currently am. And I always love a good excuse to bring in one-hit wonder like Semisonic. As they say, every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end, because parameters are arbitrary. So when we look at this group that we cast here, we could have just as easily made a different group here and excluded 2 different users. So we have to ask, who picked this shape? Who determined its size? And who decided that that was enough? Well, as it turns out, when we do things and when we create things, we're very good at centering ourselves. We always make sure that we're within the group. It's only natural. We always make sure that the ranges that we cast are perceivable to us. We test rigorously on ourselves. And who are we? Well, when you Google tech company, this is what comes up. So what we center, able-bodied, neurotypical, cis, hetero male, wealthy experience. And there's more here. We center skinniness, we center conventional beauty, we center youth, but limiting it for the purposes of today. And what it does is it intentionally casts the rest of us as edge cases. So you might be thinking, well, why don't we just make the parameters bigger? Seems like a logical solution. Why don't we just cast a bigger circle to make sure we include everyone? But that leaves us with a conundrum. Why do we define edge cases? That's where we need to start. Well, we define edge cases because we have limitations to our software. Our software is only intended to do so much for so many people. We have to set boundaries so that we can have things to test against. And we have budgets. We can't spend infinite budget to accommodate everyone. And limitations mean exclusivity, which means the triple bottom line, baby. And what does this smell like? It smells a lot like capitalism, or as they say here in Germany, Kapitalismus. Capitalism or capitalismus scares us with scarcity. And that's not fabricated out of thin air. If we look at this, where limitations means exclusivity, which means premium cost, which means triple bottom line, we have to look at who the triple bottom line cares about. This is who cares about the triple bottom line. And we're going to enhance a Google tech company CEO. So this group that we're centering here over and over and over and repeatedly is the tech CEOs. And we, as the creators and as the workers, are not immune to this, because we are often outside of the circle. You watching right here, or your friend, or me, we aren't centered in this always. But what centers us is the white supremacist capitalist patriarchy. That's what's being prioritized. And it's what's kept meritocratic mediocrity in power since the 17th century, and what continues to define everything we do today. And that's the thing, is that we might be outside of these circles, but we can still contribute to the very systems that harm us. And they can also simultaneously benefit us. But we're not at fault for this. But we, as the creators of the web, are responsible, regardless of what we intend, because intent does not erase impact. Because intent is the focus of the creator, right? We talk about design intent. What is the intent of our product? But we do so without often thinking about the impact that our intent might have on our user. And then we have to think about the systems that are actually guiding us. We don't as the creators. The limitation is in the intent behind those tech CEOs leads to the exclusion of our users. And you might hear that the system is broken, like all tech is broken. And I say, no, it's not broken. The system is working exactly as it is intended, because the repeated limitation leads to the marginalization of groups. Sigh, that's a lot to put on everyone. But I do have ways to fix this. So we're gonna take a little math break. Something you should know about me is that I was a math major, which was somewhat unhelpful for my career in design, except maybe here. And in math, there's something called topology. This is what I wrote my senior thesis on. It's very nerdy, but I'll reduce this into its simplest form, which is that in a topological space, things can stretch. All right, so we need to kind of extend what we understand of the physical world here. You can stretch things and you can compress things in this world, and you can bend things at will. What you can't do is you can't tear things. So you can't create new holes in objects. You can't glue things together. So once there's a hole, it exists. You can't make one hole into two holes. And you can't collapse things. So a hole exists and it is always there. You can bend it into its smallest form, but there will always be a hole. All right. So basically in 30 seconds, I taught you what it took me a year to learn. And the fun of topology is that this mug and this donut are what we call topologically equivalent. That I can take this mug and squish down the part that holds the coffee and extend it a little and make it. Here's a little helpful GIF to show you how that happens. Pretty cool, huh? Well, if you need convincing, it can also turn a cow into a circular, cute cow. So step one, now that we know this topological space, what do? Well, we first need to recenter the circle. So here we have a donut, and outside of the donut, we have everyone who's marginalized, and inside B is everyone who's centered. Well, in the topological space, we can actually invert this donut. We can put B on the outside and A on the inside. And I didn't Photoshop the donut because I think it looked quite nasty, but you get the idea. And what that does, the impact it has is it recenters the marginalized. What you might be saying is, but doesn't that just marginalize somebody else? No, you weren't paying attention to the topology. So when we have the original circle and B is who's commonly centered, and we're drawing these circles over and over and over again, when we invert the donut, it has the same effect. We will always encompass everyone who is always centered. We will always center the white, cis, male, heteroneurotypical, wealthy, able-bodied experience. So by centering the most vulnerable, that ensures that everyone is included, because accessibility helps everyone. And step two, we need to embrace contradiction. And I love this quote by our dear Walt Whitman. Do I contradict myself? Very well. Then I contradict myself. I am large. I contain multitudes. And I think that expresses something very well. You might be familiar with the Mobius strip, something you can knit, Tracy. And the Mobius strip is essentially this shape where it's one edge. Pretty cool. Well, if in the center we have A, and on the outside we have B, A and B can simultaneously exist as the same edge. So in the middle and at the edge, both can be. And things will seem contradictory, because capitalism is what's driving this. And it tells us there's only one truth, because one truth is simple, it's cheaper, it's easier. And abundance allows for a lot of nuance, which takes time. And time is lost money in capitalism. Abundance allows us for simultaneous truths. And what is good for one user might be bad for another. We encounter this all the time, that sometimes we are accidentally doing harm to one user by trying to help another. And all we can do is minimize as much harm as we can to all. step 3, flip the script. Here, when we talk about, always start with design intent, and that defines our impact, as we saw earlier. And that's focusing on what the creator needs at the risk of what the user might experience. But luckily, we have something to follow here. In the words of Lewis Sullivan, form follows function. Well, then why can't intent follow impact? Why can't we take what the creator intends and first prioritize what user impact we might have? When we limit it to the intent of the creator, we will always lead to the exclusion of at least one user. But what if we instead started with the inclusion of every user? Well, that would lead the expansion of the creator. It would lead the creator, lead us to have more knowledge, to have more understanding and more compassion. And you notice I said compassion, not empathy, because empathy is a scam. Empathy is basically the capacity to understand or to feel what another person is experiencing, the capacity to place oneself in another's position. Well, essentially what we're doing there is we're validating someone else's lived experience by centering our own, and we can't ever know their truth. And that's what got us here in the first place. We centered our experience. We drew our groups around us. We defined the ranges based on our own perceptions. So we first need to define the impact we want to have on our user, and then allow our design intent to follow. And then I think this is step 4. We should ask who is missing. A lovely leader, inclusive design leader, Benjamin Evans at Airbnb, asked this question, and he's always sitting on my shoulder helping me to ask it. And this isn't just limited to asking this question for our user testing and who's in our user groups, but also who's in the room. Who holds the power to define who is missing? And I implore to new edges in order to make new centers. Thank you.
That was really great. Thank you so much. I love listening because you talk about this in a way that I feel like people can understand, and you talk about it in a way that doesn't make me doesn't stress me out. I think a lot of talks related to this topic, sometimes they're like, you're kind of like, oh, and it's really important to, it's presented in a way that everybody feels included as well, kind of like in these conversations. So thank you so much for doing that.
Yeah.
So next up, I'm very excited that Jen is going to be talking about accessibility myths. So I'm curious, Jen, like, I don't know what your talk is, but I'm curious if I'm, believing some of these myths.
Let's see what happens, shall we?
Yeah. I can see your screen looking good. Still looking good. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so missing a window. Okay, there we go. All right, so accessibility myths. A lot of us are starting to really dig into accessibility at work. It's become a pretty big topic over the last about 5 years or so. Though it's always been something that we've considered, it feels that it's only really been recently that there's been emphasis placed on the level of accessibility that we give our users as well as ourselves. So I want to talk a bit about some accessibility myths or truths, depending on what happens through this talk, mostly to describe how our perception adjusts how we write our code as well. So tying very, very well into said previous talk. So the first one is this. This app is internal. We don't need to think about accessibility. Right, I've heard this one a lot about how it's only for us, it's only for the devs, it's only for the salespeople, it's only for the marketers, so they have some access to some database that we don't want to have to constantly touch, and we don't really need to think about accessibility because it's just us. And I want to allow you to think about this for a second. If someone with a disability wants to join your company, can they? Or are they limited because the tool doesn't allow them to? Not only that, but there are quite a few people that actually do have a disability in this world. So for the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, it said that 25% of US adults and 40% over age 65 or older, they have a disability of some sort. And those are only permanent disabilities, ones that are physical and stick with them from here on out, right? So we're thinking a blindness, or we're thinking color blindness, or we're thinking missing arms, something to that effect, right? Except for the fact that there's a lot more to this than one would think. All right, so the next myth at this point is accessibility is for people with vision impairments. And as I've mentioned before, we think about that a lot. We talk about, well, can they use a keyboard? Or if they have color blindness of some sort, do they have the ability to see all the colors that are required? So doing color contrast, right? And this all plays again into, whether our internal or external apps are all accessible, right? Except for the fact that people with vision impairments, and though they are included in this, there are a lot of other people and a lot of other disabilities. There are hearing disabilities, the mobility disabilities, people in wheelchairs or people with walkers or people with crutches. There are cognitive disabilities. So people with autism, for instance, or any other. We have language barriers, which is in fact a disability if you think about it. If you go to a different country and you don't speak the language, you are incapable of asking the questions that you need answers to. It's even hard to order from a menu, let alone ask for a bathroom. So you at that point are in fact disabled. And going back to cognitive for just a second, what if you're a child? A lot of these things that we are concerned with have a lot to do with focusing it towards, again, us as adults. Trying to deal with language barriers when we live in a country that speaks our language, or trying to deal with mobility barriers when we ourselves take advantage of those things, it becomes a lot bigger than you'd think. It goes much farther beyond color contrast and keyboard navigation. It also goes into things like whether the ability for people to understand your website is accessible. Oftentimes they say don't write your website beyond much more than a third grade reading level to make sure that you cover not only people with advanced degrees, but also those that are having issues with language barriers, for instance. To follow that up, automation testing is enough to be compliant. But it's not, because automation testing can do things like check for color contrast, but it doesn't check for things like whether your language is too difficult or whether the flow from entering your website to purchasing is accessible, whether it's easy to navigate, whether the questions are understandable. It doesn't even cover whether you resize your screen and see that the tab order changes. These things are all part of accessibility. Some other things that I didn't include on this list are captions, transcripts for, this podcast, for instance, or meetups, conferences, the ability to read it if you can't see it. I mean, there's also, or if you can't hear it, there's also the other option. The thing that I like to say is, what if you are in a noisy bar and you're trying to show a friend a video that you saw that's really funny? If you're in that noisy bar, you can't hear the video, but you could read the captions. It's something that we all use. There's also audio descriptions for video content. People again, that are blind or have those visual impairments aren't going to be able to watch a video per se, but they can hear it. And understanding what is going on is also very important. So there's quite a few other items on this list. Content that relies on sensory characteristics to understand, specifically like vision and hearing or touch. Audio control, being able to turn up the volume, being able to turn it down, being able to mute it. Keyboards, pause, stop, and hides, error prevention and error handling. What happens if there's a problem? Can they retry? Do they know that they need to retry? Do they even know there's an error? Another problem, or myth in this case, is an accessible website is boring or ugly. But in all reality, though there are some color contrast restrictions, other than that, you can do just about whatever you like. It's just a matter of making sure that what you do is still usable. Things can still be beautiful and useful. Form and function, beauty. It's just a matter of making sure that more people can appreciate it. And the biggest one that I've heard is that web accessibility is expensive. It takes time, and time is money, my friend. But I want you to think about a couple different things. There are 25% of US adults with a disability. And though it is true that those with disabilities also suffer from financial issues oftentimes because of those disabilities, we have the ability to help with that. We have the ability to increase the income of those that need it the most just by making sure that our internal sites are in fact accessible. We can allow them access to those jobs that they maybe couldn't have done without just a little bit of extra help from us. But again, accessibility is expensive. It takes time, it takes effort, it takes money, it takes extra cycles. But what if those people could use your site? According to a study done by DQ, only about 1 in 10 websites is accessible, which means that you still have the ability to corner the market. You still have the ability to access not just your user base, but a much larger, potentially, user base of people that have those disabilities that can't access anywhere else. You could take your business model and dramatically increase the income just by allowing others to use your website. And when it came down to it, if you couldn't buy something on that website, you would be hopping to a hotfix so fast. But if another user, someone who needs to use a keyboard only because their mouse is dead and they have a magic mouse that plugs in on the bottom, you're losing that business. You're losing the business because color contrast prevents someone from identifying when it's a link and when it's not. You're losing business because the flow is confusing. So it's expensive to include some of the deeper accessibility features. But how much money are you losing that would very easily cover that? And not only that, but most of accessibility is extremely cheap. It's just a matter of making sure that colors have a high enough contrast. It's making sure that alt tags are included on your images, or that you use a button instead of a div. It's in the choices that we make. It doesn't have to be expensive. And it doesn't have to all be done today. It can be something that we do incrementally. And when we're thinking about ourselves and how we fit into those circles, and others and how they fit into their circles, and how we could fit into each other's circles, I want you to remember to be kind, because everyone you meet is fighting JavaScript. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jen. That was Awesome. And I kind of love how both talks really kind of, you know, themed each other very well. So it, you know, I think this is actually a really great modern web event to just, I think, just, you know, inclusion in tech is such an important thing. And you guys did a really presented two really great reasons and ways how we can, you know, we can continue to better ourselves in tech by focusing on these things. So thank you so much. And again, you can follow everybody on Twitter. You can follow me on Twitter at Lady Leet if you feel like speaking at one of these events. You can follow Tatiana on Twitter at Tatiana Mac and ask her about all the exciting things that, you know, diversity, inclusion, performance. What was the last talk you gave? Well, the last talk that I saw you give was diversity in performance. It wasn't diverse, like making sure performance, making sure that what you're saying about performance is not exclusionary. Is that correct? Did I say that right?
The name of the talk is How Privilege Defines Performance.
Thank you. But really enjoyed, you know, the topics you brought up there. And Jen, are you speaking at? What's the next conference? Is it Chain React that you're going to be speaking at, or?
I think my next one is actually KCDC, but after that, I've got both JSConf and React Rally.
Yay, cool. Well, excited. You can check Jen out there. Again, you can follow her on Twitter at KnitCodeMonkey. And then Eva as well. You can follow Eva on Twitter at Eva How. If you care about helping change the ratio in tech, Eva has been working with a lot of different companies through Vistant and trying to figure out different ways that we can bring more women in tech, help change that pipeline. So message her if you like. And besides that, thank you so much. A lot of folks are saying thank you in the chat. So yeah, see y'all soon. Thank you. Have a really great day.